Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome back into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network Team Autopsy Report. We got the LSU Tigers on the autopsy table for the next 30 minutes. Always a pleasure to be with you. If you're watching this on YouTube or watching this on our Twitter feed at Crunch Time VIP, thank you very much. If you're listening to your favorite podcast platform, anything that I reference that'll be on the screen, I got you covered here. Let's start right there with the head coach, Brian Kelly. 21 years as a head coach with a winning percentage of 73%. This man knows how to coach, and we're not even going to remotely dispute that. We're just going to take a look at his last two stops, though, because that's where the significance of his record really, really takes shape for me. This man spent 12 years as the head coach of Notre Dame, 113 wins and 40 losses, 74% winning percentage there. In his 3 years at Baton Rouge, 29 wins, 11 losses. Again, about a 73% winning percentage. He's gotten it done. He just hasn't gotten over the hump and won a national title. Does he have the squad in 2025 to get that done? We'll talk about that much later in the summer, but for right now, let's take a look at what he did in 2024 with this talented squad. Once again, there for the Bayou Bengals there. Let's start with the season win total back in June. This team had a season win total of 9.5. lofty expectations for a very talented group that was coming back. This team fell short of that by a full game and a half. So we're going to examine some of those data points. When we look at our composite win total, three very unique but very specific things that I look for and the rest of our team looks for makes up that composite win total. We had LSU at a 7.2. So they did exceed that mark, but I want you to draw the conclusion. We had them lower than where the sports books had them to start the season, and certainly where they ended up. I think I'm going to be able to find that game that they won that we weren't expecting them to get that W last year. Now, let's talk about the strength of schedule and strength of record. Your strength of schedule, you can really only control your non-conference portion of it as far as how you schedule. Do you schedule a bunch of FCS and group of 6 teams, or do you really kind of step up in weight class and really try to challenge yourself? Well, LSU absolutely did that last year, and their strength of schedule, 0.629. It was the number 2 schedule out of 134 Division I teams for us last year. Now, your strength of record. This is something that you really can't control as much, but it basically kind of looks at how did your opponents do throughout their regular season. LSU's opponents, 0.583, 31st out of 134 teams. So what's that kind of leading me to here? Their opponents were power ranked high. The win-loss record may not completely reflect that. And we're going to pull it up here on the screen. And like I said, podcast listeners, don't worry, I got you covered here. Let's take a look at LSU's opponents last year and how their records really lined up. USC in that opener finished 6-6. Going to bypass the FCS opponent in Nichols. South Carolina was a 9-3 team last year. UCLA, as they did the LA two-step there, finished 5-7. South Alabama 6-6. Ole Miss 9-3. Arkansas 6-6. Texas A&M 8-4. Alabama 9-3. Florida 7-5. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma finished the regular season with a 6-6 record. So as you can see, a power ranking a little bit higher, but the win-loss record by their opponents, absolutely not there. And like I said, periodically we'll do this for a few select teams, but just to kind of give you an idea of where we saw LSU from an overall standpoint. LSU finished the regular season as our number 26 rated team. From just a pure power ranking standpoint, we had LSU at 17th. And when we look at our Crunch Time Sports Advantage College Football Playoff Committee rankings, we also had LSU at 26. So a very solid team, just not good enough to get you to the college football playoffs. Now, let's take a look at how good were the defenses for LSU's opponents last year, just to kind of give you an idea of what this offense faced week in and week out. We use a baseline of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams that there were last year in college football. So let's go through it. USC was the 38th best defense last year. South Carolina had the 7th best defense. UCLA had a top 50 defense coming in at number 50. Ole Miss had the 4th best defense. Arkansas was 44th. A&M 30th. Alabama was 6th. Florida was 17th. Vanderbilt was 32nd. And Oklahoma was the 8th best defense for us in college football last year. When you take a look at it, folks, 10 out of their 12 opponents finished inside of the top 68. So this LSU offense was going up against really good defenses basically week in and week out. And when you look at an average power ranking of about 29, this would have been a team that would have barely been outside of the top 25 each week from a defensive standpoint. You're talking about a team that's probably 9-3 defensive wise there. So that's something to keep in mind when we go through their data. And I said that their composite win total was 7.2, and they finished the regular season with 8 wins. I think I can tell you exactly the game where we kind of feel from a metric standpoint that they probably won, that maybe they shouldn't have. You can really flip a coin here. It's either 2 games, but we'll pick one of these. It's either well, no, because they won both of those. Okay, so I'm going to go with the Ole Miss game that they won 29-26. That's a game that Ole Miss absolutely was kicking themselves over losing. So I'm going to say from a metric standpoint, that's the game that LSU probably won, that from a data standpoint that we thought could have gone in the L column. Okay, let's get into the deep dive here for about the next 6 or 7 minutes talking about the LSU offense. The first number I'm going to give you is what the NCAA average was. Then I'm going to give you LSU's number data point for that category. And then I'm going to give you our adjusted number for opponent for that particular category. So let's start with the points per game. Average team last year scored 28 points per game. LSU was at 29.3, but when we adjust that for opponent, 33.4 points per game. Remember, I mentioned how good the quality of defenses that they face. Expect to see a lot of these numbers get bumped up based on the opponent. Passing yards per game. Average team last year, 227 yards per game. LSU was at 315. When we adjust that for opponent, 321. So slight improvement there. Average team last year ran the ball for 160 yards per game. Metrically, LSU, one of the worst rushing offenses in college football last year. 116.6 yards per game. However, when we adjust that for opponent, they are basically sitting right there at the NCAA average with 159 yards per game. So a 42 yard per game improvement when we adjust that for the caliber of opponents that they faced last year. The average team, as far as total offense, 387 yards per game. LSU was at 432. However, once again, when we adjust for opponent, it goes to 480 yards per game. So a 48-yard improvement over what their raw accounting stats say they were. So this LSU offense was good last year. When we adjusted for opponent, they were actually even better. So that's something to keep in mind with this LSU team going into 2025. Now, let's dive even deeper into the numbers here. Average team drives ending with a score, touchdown or field goal, about 40%. LSU was at a whopping 60% last year. Drives ending with a touchdown. Average team was about 29%. Again, LSU, 39%. I told you this offense was potent. And third down conversions. Average team about 39% last year. LSU was at a 57% clip. Fantastic there. And we talked about it. Having those bookend tackles in Emory Jones and, of course, top 5 pick in Campbell. Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback for LSU, was protected like a newborn baby. Only 16 sacks allowed last year. Impressive. 15 turnovers. That's not horrible. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's take one more step deeper into the numbers here. And when we look at our 3 E's, how effective, explosive, and efficient was your offense last year? As far as effective offense, LSU was 9th. Now, Big play explosiveness, we didn't see that from LSU this year. They were 42nd in our metrics. And then as far as efficiency, they were 12th. LSU ended the regular season for us in 2024 as the number 21 ranked offense in college football last year. If I had to bullet point this offense, I would say high-powered passing game, inconsistent running game. I don't think too many LSU fans would really disagree with that assessment there. And we'll talk about this a little bit more detail, but I want to go ahead and get this put in. LSU's passing game kept them competitive, but the run game kind of disappeared. And when that happened, they absolutely struggled. So let's talk about the quarterback here, because everything is going to revolve around this young man coming back in a smart move by Garrett Nussmeier, get a little bit more seasoning before going into the NFL draft. In 13 games last year, Nussmeier only completed 64% of his passes. I think that young man is even better than that 64% completion percentage. Want to see that up around 67%. 4,052 yards, 29 passing touchdowns, but 12 INTs. I love the touchdowns. Nussmeier, we got to get the INTs down. 2.3% of all of your passes thrown last year ended up in the opponent's hands last year. You're talking about being a future top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I need you to cut that interception total pretty much almost in half. You do that, we could be talking about a special season in 2025 for the Tigers there in Baton Rouge. Averaged about 300 yards per game passing. So the yards are there. We just need the mistakes not to be there. Now, this is a team that absolutely struggled to run the ball. I talked about it. Their leading rusher there in Baton Rouge in 12 games, Caden Durham, 140 attempts, 753 yards, 5.4 yards per attempt, but only 6 touchdowns. He averaged 63 yards per game rushing. That's not to the standard that LSU holds themselves to, and it's certainly not the standard that I hold them to. Have way too much respect for this program and the running backs that they've had throughout their history. For your leading running back to have less than 800 yards during the regular season, that's not the standard. Now, leading receiver last year, Aaron Anderson, 61 receptions, 884 yards, 5 touchdowns, 68 yards per game or season. And before we go any further, and we won't get into all the details, but our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Kyron Lacey for everything that that young man went through, and losing his life was absolutely tragic. So on behalf of our team here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, want to send our condolences out to his family and Godspeed, because there is no easy transition when you're trying to do one of these shows, but you want to at least acknowledge that tragic situation there. Okay, let's get to the defense for LSU. How good was their defense? We're going to judge that based on how good were the offenses that they faced last year. And again, we're going to use that baseline number of 68. So how many offenses were inside of that top 68? Well, USC was 27th. South Carolina was 19th. Ole Miss was the 5th best offense in college football for us last year. Arkansas was 35th. Texas A&M was 22nd. Alabama at the number 2 scoring offense for us last year. Florida was 25th. Vanderbilt was 51st. Oklahoma was 62nd. So none of their opponents were inside of that top 68. Now, the quality of offenses that LSU's defense went up against, not nearly as difficult as the defenses that LSU's offense had to go up against. You're talking about an average power ranking of 38. This is a defense that would have probably been somewhere around that 7-5 mark. Good, just not as big of a challenge as LSU's offense faced last year. Now, for the defense, I'm just going to give you their accounting stats and then our adjusted numbers. So, points per game. LSU was giving up about 23.8 points per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to 19 points per game. So about a 5 point per game improvement. As far as the passing yards go, 206 yards per game passing. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to 174 yards per game. So an improvement of 32 yards per game. And then as far as the rushing stats go, 146.6 rushing yards per game allowed. When we adjust for opponent, goes down to 140. So a 6-yard improvement. Their total offense allowed to their opponents per game, 352.5. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to 314. So they overall were about a 39-yard per game improvement when we adjust for opponent, instead of just looking at the raw counting numbers. Now, let's take a look at some of the advanced numbers. 33% of their opponent's drive ended with a score, touchdown or field goal. 21% of their opponent's drive ended with a touchdown. And their opponents converted 34.4% on third downs. These are all better than the NCAA average. This team actually did a great job of getting after the opponent's quarterback. 33 forced sacks by LSU's defense. They got this thing cranked up later in the season, so good job there. Their opponents, 15 attempts on fourth downs, converted 6 of them. Only a 40% clip there. Now, where LSU kind of struggled on the defensive end, not forcing enough turnovers. Only 13 forced turnovers there. So that's something to keep in mind going into next year. And when I look at this LSU defense, if I had to bullet point them, I would say it was solid, but did show some inconsistencies at times. And that'll show up in their 3 E's. This defense was the 27th rated defense as far as effective defense goes. As far as giving up explosive plays, LSU gave up a lot more explosive plays than we're used to. They ranked 62nd in that number for us. And then as far as efficiency goes, the 39th rated efficiency defense. Overall, LSU finished the regular season for us as the 42nd rated defense. So I said solid but inconsistent. Those 3 E's really show that up in a lot of great detail. This team finished the regular season with a -2 turnover differential. Penalties weren't that big of an issue. Now let's take a look at the coaching and situational play. In one-score games under Brian Kelly last year, this team was 3-1 in one-score games. However, against quality opponents, 5 wins and 4 losses in 9 games. So when you play in a tough conference, man, you're going to face a lot of quality opponents. Got to find a way to get a couple of more wins if you have aspirations of making it to the college football playoffs. And as far as being aggressive on fourth downs, Kelly was 43rd out of 144 qualifying coaches last year. Attempted 21 fourth down and converted 10 of those, far below the average conversion rate. So maybe shouldn't have been as aggressive in some of those situations as he was last year. Now let's take a look at the splits here. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I do that, thank you. In the headsets. Special teams, 22 for 26 on their field goal attempts, about 85%. So solid job there. But the punting absolutely was a huge disappointment. 39.7 yards per punt. That's one of the worst average per punts in all of Division I football. So got to get better play there from both sides of your special teams unit, not just your field goal kicker, but your punter as well. Got to be a better contributor there. So let's take a look at the splits now. As far as the 8 games that LSU won 35 points per game, 321 yards passing, 8 yards per attempt, 12.2 yards per completion. The run game, it was okay. 29 rushing attempts per game for 129 yards per game, 4.5 yards per rushing attempt. Total offense about 450 yards per game, 6.5 yards per play. This team was really good on third downs when they won. 53%, only committed 7 turnovers. In their 4 losses, 18 points per game. So their points per game basically slashed in half. They were still throwing for over 300 yards. The yards per passing attempt goes down to 6.8. Yards per completion goes down to 11. Rushing attempts, again, about 29, but in their losses, only 92 yards per game, 3.2 yards per carry. So the run game was extremely disappointing for LSU. You're talking about total offense of 396 yards per game. Still okay on third down conversions, 47%, but in those 4 losses committed 8 turnovers. So one more turnover in their 4 losses than they had in their 8 victories. So we know situational turnovers absolutely bit this team last year. Now let's take a look at the defensive splits. In their 8 wins, this defense was absolutely lights out, giving up just 16 points per game. Opponents only throwing for 203 yards per game on 29 attempts, 7.1 yards per attempt, 11.4 yards per completion. Their opponents were running the ball about 32 times per game for only 128 yards per game, 4 yards per rushing attempt. Very solid there in their 8 wins with the rush defense, giving up about 331 yards per game in total offense, 5.5 yards per play. You get more consistent play like that week in and week out, you're now talking about a team that's in the college football playoffs. Their opponents only converting 36% on third downs, 50% on fourth downs, and they forced 12 total turnovers in those 8 wins. In the 4 losses, LSU's defense was giving up almost 34 points per game. The passing yardage stays about the same, 212 yards per game on 25 attempts, 8.4 yards per attempt, but the yards per completion goes up to 14.1. So I mentioned giving up some big plays, definitely gave up some big passing plays in those losses. Rush defense was absolutely leaking oil significantly. 34 rushing attempts by their opponents, 184 yards per game, 5.4 yards per rushing attempt. Total offense by their opponents, 396 yards per game, 6.6 yards per play. So defense was not getting helped out by the offense, and they were paying for it. Their opponents converting a whopping 48% on third downs, only 1 forced turnover in those 4 games that they lost. So we just highlighted it. The run defense giving up almost 60 additional yards per game. And then the lack of forcing turnovers there. So in our final few moments, let's go ahead and get to the final grade for the LSU Fighting Tigers. The LSU Tigers will get a final grade of a B- from us. Very solid team last year, but with an elite passing offense, the inconsistent running game, and defensive lapse kept this team from reaching their full potential, which is making the college football playoff. Their ability to win close games helped, but against top-tier opponents, they really struggled to maintain that balance. So in our final couple of minutes here before we get out of here, let's talk about the three keys for LSU in 2025 that, if they address, could be in for a very special season there in Baton Rouge. One, you got to develop a more consistent running game. I highlighted all the data points there, and even in the wins, this LSU offense, from a running standpoint, was not enough to balance out what we were seeing with Garrett Nussmeier as the quarterback. Key number two, must improve defensive big play prevention. We talked about it in the passing game. When this team lost, they were absolutely getting carved up. Same can be said about their run defense. Explosive holes everywhere. And then key number three, and I mentioned this, and that's why I highlighted it, upgrade the special teams, particularly the punting. Your punter has absolutely got to be a weapon for you in this conference and in those matchups, to where you can flip the field, absolutely can be the difference between a win and a loss in at least one of your games during the regular season. If LSU improves in these areas, LSU would not only be a legitimate SEC contender in 2025, but this team could absolutely make the college football playoffs and make a run at another national title.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.